The Alpha King's daughter screamed at every touch as the Omega Nanny found poison needles her bones. The wind howled like a lonely wolf across the jagged towers of the Alpha King's fortress. Night draped over the stone walls like a heavy curtain, and the cold crept into every corner of the castle. Flickering torchlight danced along the corridors, casting shadows that seemed to move with a life of their own. The castle had always been a place of power and fear, but lately it whispered of something darker, a secret that even the king could not yet see. In the highest tower, where the stars touched the windows like silver tears, Princess Lyra lay trembling beneath layers of silk blankets. Even the softest touch made her cry out, her small body shaking as though the air itself had become fire. Servants whispered in hushed tones, avoiding her chamber as if proximity might summon a curse. No one dared approach the princess, except for one woman. Ira, the Omega Nanny, had been summoned from a distant land, known for her uncanny intuition and gentle hands. She stepped into Lyra's room with a calm that seemed to push back the cold shadows. Her eyes, gray as storm clouds, scanned the chamber. She noticed the faint marks along Lyra's arms, almost invisible like delicate threads of silver, and a chill ran down her spine. "Your Highness," Ira said softly, kneeling beside the trembling girl. "May I sit with you?" Lyra flinched violently. Her voice, barely more than a whisper, trembled. "No, don't leave me alone." Ira's heart ached, but she did not withdraw. Instead, she reached slowly, letting her hands hover above the blankets. She spoke gently, weaving a rhythm of calm in her voice. "I am not here to harm you. I only want to help. You are safe here." For a long moment, Lyra's blue-gray eyes darted toward her with fear and suspicion. Then she slowly allowed Ira's fingers to brush against her hand. She gasped, and a soft scream escaped her lips. Ira's heart clenched. She had seen fear before, but this was unlike any she had known. It was as if Lyra's very bones trembled with dread. And then she saw it, the faint glimmer beneath the princess's skin. Tiny needles, almost invisible, embedded deep in her flesh. They seemed to shimmer faintly, like silver threads in the torchlight. Poison. Magical poison. Ira's breath caught. These were no ordinary poisons of the kind sold in marketplaces or brewed in hidden kitchens. They were enchanted, poison that lived inside the body, feeding on fear, pain, and sorrow. She had heard of such things in whispered tales, in stories meant to frighten children, never imagining she would see one in a living princess. She reached for Lyra's hand again, more firmly this time, and whispered, "Do not scream. I can remove them, but you must trust me." Lyra's scream shattered the silence, bouncing off the stone walls. Her body arched as if repelling the very air around her. Ira held on, her own strength quiet and steady, a rock in a stormy sea. Slowly she felt the tiny needles beneath the princess's skin, each one sending a cold shiver up her arm. "These are not natural," Ira murmured. "Someone wants you broken, little one. Someone in this castle, and I will find them." Lyra's lips trembled. Her voice, small and trembling, barely carried the words. Why would anyone do this to me?" Ira swallowed. The truth was dangerous, and she chose her words with care. "Because some people fear what they cannot control, but I will protect you. I swear it." Outside the tower, the wind rattled the shutters, carrying with it the scent of wet stone and iron. Somewhere in the castle, eyes watched. The Alpha King, imposing and stern, ruled his halls with a quiet fury, unaware that the daughter he thought protected by walls and guards was already under attack. That night, Ira did not sleep. She sat beside Lyra, listening to her uneven breaths, studying the patterns of the tiny needles embedded beneath the skin. She had never seen such magic before, and her heart ached with the knowledge that it would not be easy to remove. Each needle fed on the princess's fear, twisting her body and spirit, and if left unchecked it could take her life, or worse, leave her a shell of herself. The next morning, the castle was alive with the bustle of noble servants, armored guards and courtiers seeking the favor of the king. But Ira moved silently through the corridors, unseen, invisible as the shadows themselves. She had already begun to investigate the origin of the poison, following a trail of whispers and half-hidden symbols etched into the stone walls. Lyra, for her part, clung to Ira as though she were the only anchor in a sea of terror. Her screams had softened to frightened murmurs, though they still came with every touch. Ira's hands, steady and warm, were the only thing keeping her tethered to the world. In the king's private chambers, the Alpha King frowned at the report of his daughter's condition. He was a man of immense power, with a voice that could command armies and silence rebels, yet even he felt powerless before her suffering. "This is impossible," he muttered. "No one can harm her under my roof." But Ira knew better. The needles, though small, were a sign of something far greater, a conspiracy that ran deeper than even the king could perceive. And the magic behind them was not the work of a mere servant or rival family. This was the touch of someone with knowledge of forbidden arts. That afternoon, Ira returned to Lyra's chamber. She had prepared poultices and wards, enchanted to slow the poison's effect, though they could not remove it entirely. Lyra flinched as Ira approached, her screams piercing the quiet like glass breaking. Yet despite the terror, she did not pull away completely. "You are brave, even if you do not know it," Ira whispered, placing a hand gently on Lyra's shoulder. "I will not let them hurt you. I will not fail." And then, as she applied the first of her protective poultices, a shadow passed beneath the window. Ira's gaze followed it, sharp and alert. A figure, tall, cloaked, and silent, watched from the edge of the courtyard. The figure vanished as quickly as it had appeared, but the sense of threat remained, like a cold finger tracing her spine. Lyra shivered violently. Who is there?" she asked, fear thick in her voice. "No one you need fear," Ira said softly, though her heart raced. She had seen danger before, but something about this presence felt ancient, cruel, and patient. Whoever it was, they had been waiting for the right moment to strike. The rest of the day passed in tense silence. Ira stayed close to Lyra, talking in low whispers, telling stories of distant lands and gentle rivers, of heroes who faced impossible odds and survived. She hoped the words would distract the princess, soothe her, and give her courage. And slowly she felt it working. Lyra's breathing became less jagged. Her eyes, though still wide with fear, began to trust the steady presence of the Omega beside her. As night fell, Ira stood by the window, gazing at the stars. Something in her mind would not rest. The needles, though slow in their work, were clever. They moved beneath the skin, hiding, reacting, feeding. And the presence of that shadowy figure outside, the one who seemed to know her every move, told her that the danger was far from over. She turned back to Lyra, who had curled beneath her blankets, finally asleep for the first time in days. Ira's hand rested lightly on the girl's arm, feeling the faintest tremor beneath her touch. She whispered a silent vow, a promise carried by the wind through the towers and over the dark forests below. "I will protect you, princess, no matter what it takes, no matter what darkness waits." Outside, the castle walls groaned under the wind. The shadow in the courtyard lingered, watching, patient. And in the quiet of the night, the tiny poison needles pulsed faintly beneath Lyra's skin, as if aware of the storm that was coming. The castle, vast and cold, held secrets that even the king could not see. But Ira had begun to unravel them, and though fear gripped the princess with every touch, hope, fragile, flickering, had begun to bloom. In the dark corridors, whispered threats and hidden eyes awaited the moment to strike. And Ira, brave and unwavering, prepared to face the unknown. For in this castle of shadows, only the courageous could survive, and the princess, screaming at every touch, would soon learn that even the most fragile hearts could grow strong enough to fight destiny itself. The castle was quiet, but not at peace. Shadows clung to the corners of the halls like restless spirits, and the faint echo of footsteps seemed to follow Ira wherever she went. The first light of dawn struggled through the narrow windows of the fortress, casting pale stripes across the stone floors. Despite the soft glow, the air felt heavy with secrets, and Ira could feel them pressing against her skin. Princess Lyra had slept fitfully, her dreams filled with shadows and whispers she could not understand. When she woke, her small body was rigid with fear. Even the lightest brush of a blanket across her shoulders made her cry out. Yet Ira was there, as she had promised, calm and unwavering, sitting beside her with a bowl of warm herbal tea. "Drink this," Ira said gently. "It will help you rest, even if only for a little while." Lyra's eyes, wide and still wary, darted toward the door. "What if they come back?" "They cannot reach you while I am here," Ira replied firmly. Her voice carried more than comfort. It carried a shield, a promise that no one could break. "You are safe. I will not let them harm you." Lyra hesitated, then took the cup with trembling hands. The warmth spread through her fingers, and for a moment she felt a strange sense of calm. It was fleeting, like the brief sun on a winter morning, but it was enough. Ira's mind, however, was far from calm. She had spent the night studying the poison needles, tracing their faint glow under her careful inspection. Each one was small, thin, and deadly, infused with magic that fed on fear and pain. They were cleverly hidden beneath the princess's skin, almost invisible, yet their presence was unmistakable. Someone inside the castle had used forbidden magic to do this. The question that burned in Ira's mind was why? Who could gain by weakening the princess? And what did they hope to achieve by feeding her fear? She decided to begin her investigation carefully. The castle was a maze of stone corridors, secret stairways, and hidden doors. Few servants knew all its passages, and fewer dared to enter them. Ira moved silently, her feet making no sound against the cold floor. Every shadow, every whisper of wind through the halls could be a clue or a trap. Her first stop was the library. Ancient scrolls and tomes filled the high shelves, many protected by magic that could burn the untrained hand. Ira's fingers brushed against the leather-bound books, feeling the faint energy in each one. She looked for anything related to curses, magical poisons, or enchantments placed upon living beings. Hours passed as she studied, her mind racing through the possibilities. And then she found it, a thin, almost invisible scroll tucked behind a row of heavy books. The parchment was fragile and yellowed with age, but the writing was unmistakable. Instructions for creating needles that could pierce the body yet remain unseen, enchanted to feed on fear and pain. Ira's heart pounded. This was the work of a master, a sorcerer well-versed in forbidden magic. It could not have been the work of a servant or a minor noble. Whoever had done this had access to the king's court, and the audacity to attempt such a dangerous act under his nose. Meanwhile, Princess Lyra's condition continued to worry the household. Her screams had lessened slightly under Ira's care, but they were far from gone. Even small touches caused her body to tense, and every time she struggled, the needles seemed to shift beneath her skin, feeding on her fear and leaving a faint shimmer in their wake. Ira realized that the poison was not just physical, it was psychological. It was tied to the princess's emotions, feeding and growing stronger when she felt terror, sadness, or anger. Controlling these feelings would be as crucial as removing the needles themselves. That afternoon, Ira approached the Alpha King. The vast throne room was empty, save for the faint echo of distant guards and the sound of wind rattling the high windows. The king's presence filled the room, a towering figure of authority and power. His face, carved with the lines of responsibility and endless worry, softened only slightly as Ira stepped forward. "Your Majesty," she said, bowing her head respectfully, "there is something you must know about the princess. She is under a curse, poison needles embedded in her bones. They feed on her fear." The king's eyes narrowed, a flicker of disbelief crossing his stern features. "Impossible," he said, his voice deep and cold. "No one can reach her within these walls. I guard her with my life." "I know," Ira replied firmly, "and yet someone has done this. It is powerful magic and it cannot have come from outside. Someone in the court, someone you trust, wants her harmed." The king's jaw tightened. He had faced countless enemies, fought wars, and quelled rebellions, yet the idea of betrayal within his own halls filled him with an unfamiliar fear. He had always believed that power could protect his daughter, but now even his might was not enough. Ira continued, her voice calm but urgent. "We must find the sorcerer before the poison grows stronger. Every moment Lyra feels fear, it grows in strength. We must act quickly." The king said nothing for a long moment, studying Ira as if trying to measure the truth in her words. Then he spoke, his voice softer, almost reluctant. "Very well, you may have my permission to move freely, but if you fail—" His words trailed off, a rare vulnerability in his tone. Ira nodded. She did not need him to finish the threat. Failure was not an option. As night fell, Ira returned to Lyra's tower, determined to continue her work. She had prepared protective charms and poultices to slow the poison's effect, but she knew they were temporary. Removing the needles entirely would require precision, skill, and courage from both herself and the princess. Lyra's eyes widened as Ira approached. "Don't touch me," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I won't hurt you," Ira said gently, kneeling beside her bed. "I only want to help you feel safe." For hours, Ira worked, carefully examining the tiny needles, applying soothing herbs and protective spells. Lyra screamed at every touch, but Ira held firm, her hands steady and unwavering. Slowly, the shimmering needles began to dull, their magic weakening under the combined effect of herbs and wards. It was exhausting work, both physically and emotionally. Ira could feel her own energy waning, yet she did not stop. She knew that if she faltered, the princess's life could be at risk. Suddenly, a sound made her freeze. A faint whisper of footsteps, deliberate and slow, echoed in the corridor outside. Ira's eyes snapped to the door. Someone was watching. She whispered to Lyra, "Hide beneath the blankets. Do not move." Lyra obeyed, trembling but silent. Ira moved toward the door, her senses alert, every instinct sharpened. A shadow slipped past the window, unseen yet present, like a dark breath against the stone. Ira caught a glimpse of it, a figure, cloaked and silent, watching her work with patient malice. Then it was gone. Ira returned to Lyra, her heart pounding, but she did not speak of the intruder. There was no time for fear, only action. She whispered to the princess, "You are strong, stronger than you know. The fear you feel now will not control you forever." As the night deepened, the castle seemed to close in around them. The wind rattled the shutters, carrying with it a cold promise of danger. And yet in the small tower, amidst the shadows and whispers, a fragile bond had begun to form. Lyra, though screaming at every touch, was learning to trust Ira. And Ira, in turn, was discovering that her courage was not enough. She would need wisdom, patience, and the strength of the king himself to confront the darkness hiding in the castle. By midnight, Ira had mapped much of the castle in her mind, noting secret passages and hidden chambers where a sorcerer could move unseen. She knew that the one who had cursed Lyra was clever, cunning, and patient, waiting for the right moment to strike. But she also knew that the princess's fear, though powerful, could be tamed. Lyra stirred beside her, her eyes wide and haunted. "Will they come back?" she asked. "They may," Ira replied honestly, "but we will be ready, and together we will face them." Outside, the wind carried the faintest sound of laughter, chilling and soft, like the whisper of dry leaves in a graveyard. Ira stiffened, recognizing it for what it was, a warning. The poisoner was not just a threat. They were playing a game, one that could decide the life or death of the Alpha King's daughter. Ira held Lyra's hand, and for the first time the princess did not pull away. There was fear, yes, but also a flicker of trust, a small, fragile flame in the darkness. Ira knew that this was only the beginning. The road ahead would be long, filled with shadows and danger, but together they would face it. And somewhere in the hidden corridors of the castle, the sorcerer watched, patient and silent, preparing for the next move in a deadly game that had only just begun. The storm had come suddenly, sweeping over the castle like a wild beast. Rain lashed against the stone walls, and the wind shrieked through the towers, rattling windows and doors. The castle seemed alive, groaning under the storm's force, as though it too feared what was to come. In the tallest tower, Ira held Princess Lyra close, her hands trembling only slightly as she tried to soothe the girl's terrified body. The poison needles had grown restless. They pulsed faintly beneath Lyra's skin, reacting to the fear that lingered despite Ira's wards and soothing charms. Every breath the princess took seemed to make them stronger, every shiver feeding the cruel magic embedded in her bones. "You must try to stay calm," Ira whispered, brushing damp strands of hair from Lyra's face. "I know it hurts, I know it is frightening, but I promise I will not let them win." Lyra's voice, small and quivering, was barely audible over the storm. I can't, it hurts too much." Ira pressed a hand to the girl's chest, feeling the rapid heartbeat beneath. "I know," she said gently, "but you are stronger than you think. Even the smallest heart can hold courage." For a moment, Lyra's trembling eased, the tiniest flicker of trust appearing in her wide, blue-gray eyes. But the moment passed as the needles pulsed violently, forcing her to scream. Ira held her firmly, whispering protective spells under her breath, her voice a rhythm of calm against the storm outside. The Alpha King, who had spent the stormy evening in the depths of the castle planning a council meeting, suddenly appeared outside the tower. His heavy boots echoed against the stone as he approached the door, and Lyra's screams cut through the hallway like knives. The king paused, his chest tightening as he realized what had happened. His daughter was in pain, not from the storm, but from something far darker. Ira stepped forward to meet him, her hand still on Lyra. "Your Majesty, she is reacting to the poison needles. They are inside her bones and they grow stronger when she is afraid." The king's eyes, usually calm and commanding, flashed with a mixture of fear and anger. He had faced countless enemies, led armies, and quelled rebellions, yet nothing had prepared him for this. "Who has done this?" he demanded. "I do not yet know," Ira replied firmly. "But it is someone inside this castle, someone who knows the forbidden arts. They are clever, patient, and dangerous." The king's jaw tightened, his hands curling into fists. "I will find them," he said quietly, almost to himself. "No one harms my daughter without paying the price." Ira nodded, sensing a change in the king's demeanor. He had always ruled with authority, but this was personal. The threat was no longer political. It was deeply, terrifyingly close to his family. As the night stretched on, the storm intensified. Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the high towers in brief, violent bursts of white light. Ira continued her work, carefully applying poultices and chanting protective spells to slow the poison's effects. Each needle that pulsed beneath Lyra's skin required patience, precision, and courage. And through it all, Lyra screamed, sometimes violently, sometimes in quiet gasps of fear. But Ira did not waver. She held Lyra's hand, whispering words of comfort, letting her small fingers curl around hers. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, Lyra's screams lessened. The girl's trust, fragile and flickering, began to grow, forming a bond that was stronger than fear. Meanwhile, in the hidden corridors of the castle, the sorcerer watched. Cloaked in shadows, silent as the night itself, he observed every movement. He had anticipated resistance, but he had not expected the Omega Nanny's courage, nor the Alpha King's quiet vigilance. The game was still his, but it had become more complicated than he had imagined. By midnight, Ira sensed a change within Lyra. The needles pulsed with a strange rhythm, almost as if responding to something inside the princess. Faintly, her eyes shimmered in the dim candlelight, a glow that was both beautiful and terrifying. Something is happening, Ira whispered, feeling a thrill of fear run through her. The poison, it's awakening something within her, something powerful. Lyra's lips trembled. I feel it inside me, she whispered, her voice small but steady. It's like fire and cold, and I don't understand it. Ira's heart raced. She had suspected that the royal bloodline held latent power, but she had never imagined it would awaken in such a violent, uncontrolled way. You must try to focus, she said gently. The power is part of you. Do not fear it, or the needles will feed on your fear. The storm outside seemed to answer her words, wind and rain thrashing against the walls in a wild, chaotic symphony. And in that chaos, the castle itself seemed to tremble, as though recognizing the awakening of the princess's power. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the corridors. Someone had forced open one of the castle's secret entrances. The Alpha King and Ira exchanged a tense glance. The sorcerer had made his move. Stay close to me, Ira whispered, guiding Lyra to her feet. We must move through the hidden passages, quickly. They navigated the castle with care, using the hidden stairways Ira had discovered during her investigations. Lyra clung to her, every step sending small shivers through her body as the needles pulsed in response. The girl's screams had returned, sharp and piercing, but Ira remained calm, chanting protective spells and holding her steady. The Alpha King followed silently, his presence both protective and commanding. He had never felt more helpless than watching his daughter in pain, yet he understood that Ira's hands, steady and skilled, were the only thing keeping her alive. They reached a small, ruined tower on the edge of the castle. It was rarely used, its walls crumbling and covered with moss. Ira guided Lyra inside, pressing her to a corner where she would be safe from intrusion. The sorcerer's footsteps echoed outside, deliberate and slow, but he did not enter. He had been patient, calculating, and he had underestimated Ira's skill and the Alpha King's silent determination. Inside the tower, Ira held Lyra, her hands trembling as she worked to slow the needle's pulse. Lyra's eyes shimmered faintly in the dim light, reflecting a power she did not yet understand. "You are strong," Ira whispered, her voice calm but full of urgency. "Even if you scream, even if you fear, you are stronger than this poison. Stronger than anyone who wishes to harm you." Lyra's small hands gripped hers tightly, no longer pulling away. I want to be strong," she whispered. "I don't want to be afraid anymore." "You will be," Ira said softly. "I will help you." Outside, the storm raged on, but inside the ruined tower, a quiet calm had begun to take hold. Lyra's screams lessened, replaced by soft, shivering breaths. The needles, though still present, pulsed more slowly, their power diminished by Ira's careful wards and the girl's growing courage. And then it happened. A faint glow emanated from Lyra's body, soft and ethereal, like moonlight captured in flesh. The needles responded, their shimmer pulsing in time with the glow. Ira felt a thrill of awe and fear. The princess's latent power was awakening fully, intertwined with the poison in a delicate, dangerous balance. "Focus on the light inside you," Ira whispered. "Do not fear it. Let it guide you." Lyra's eyes widened, shimmering with power. I can feel it. Inside me, it's alive." The Alpha King stepped closer, his presence strong and unwavering. "Do not fear, Lyra," he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of authority and protection. "You are my daughter. You are safe." The combination of Ira's guidance and the king's words steadied the princess. Slowly, the glow intensified, and the needles pulsed one final time before dimming, their magic weakened. Lyra's body relaxed, trembling but free from the immediate effect of the curse. Ira exhaled, her hand still on the princess. "It is not over," she said softly, "but we have taken the first step. The poison is weaker and you are stronger than it knows." Lyra's small face lifted to Ira, eyes bright despite exhaustion. I think I trust you," she whispered. Ira smiled faintly, brushing a damp strand of hair from the girl's face. Then we will face what comes next together." Outside the ruined tower, the storm began to ease, but in the shadows, the sorcerer's patience remained. He had underestimated the courage and skill of the Omega Nanny and the bond between her and the princess. But he was not finished. The game was far from over, and the awakening of the princess's power had only made him more dangerous. Ira knew this. She had seen the shadow of the threat, felt its cold breath in the corridors. And as she held Lyra close, she whispered a vow carried on the wind through the ruined tower. "We will face it," she said softly. "No matter what darkness waits, we will not fall. Not you, not me, not the Alpha King. Together, we will survive." And somewhere, deep in the hidden corridors of the castle, the sorcerer smiled, knowing that the next move in his deadly game would be more difficult and more thrilling than ever. The dawn broke over the castle like liquid gold, illuminating the jagged towers and darkened walls. Rain from the storm had washed the stone clean, leaving a sharp, crisp scent in the air. Inside the castle, however, calm was fragile. Shadows lingered where the sorcerer had walked, and the memory of the poison needles pulsing through Lyra's body haunted every corridor. In the ruined tower on the edge of the fortress, Ira sat beside Princess Lyra, who now sat upright, trembling but alert. The faint glow from her awakening power had faded slightly, leaving behind a soft, warm radiance that seemed to pulse from within her bones. The needles were still present, though weakened, and Ira knew that the final confrontation with the poisoner was near. "You feel stronger today," Ira said, brushing damp strands of hair from Lyra's face. "The poison is weaker, and your power, it responds to courage. We must use it." Lyra's blue-gray eyes glimmered with uncertainty and fear. I don't know if I can control it. Last night it felt alive, like it could take over me." Ira took the girl's small hands in hers. "It is part of you, yes. But it listens to you as much as it listens to the needles. Do not fear it. Focus on your will, your courage, and it will follow your command." The Alpha King entered quietly, his heavy footsteps soft on the stone floor. He studied his daughter, her hands trembling but glowing faintly, and felt a surge of both pride and fear. "Lyra," he said, his voice low and steady, "you are my daughter. You have the strength of our bloodline. Do not be afraid of what is inside you. Use it." Lyra looked at him, then at Ira, and nodded slowly. I will try." Outside the ruined tower, the storm's aftermath had left the castle eerily quiet, but in the shadows, the sorcerer waited, patient and calculating. He had underestimated Ira's skill and Lyra's courage, but he had not failed. Not yet. He knew that the awakening of Lyra's power could be dangerous to him, but also to the princess herself. Ira, sensing the imminence of danger, whispered to Lyra, "Stay close to me. Do not panic. Remember your courage. Remember your light." They moved through the castle's hidden passages, careful and silent, toward the heart of the fortress where the sorcerer had made his base. The Alpha King followed closely behind, silent but alert, his presence a shield of authority and power. The corridors twisted and turned, ancient stone walls whispering secrets of the past. Finally, they reached a grand hall, darkened and empty, the floor scarred with old magic. And there in the center stood the sorcerer, his cloak billowing like smoke. His eyes glimmered with dark amusement. "You are brave," he said, his voice smooth and chilling. "But bravery alone cannot save you. The princess is mine. She will fall under the curse and the kingdom will tremble." Ira stepped forward, standing protectively in front of Lyra. "You will not touch her," she said firmly. "Your magic is cruel, but it will not win here." The sorcerer laughed softly, a sound like dry leaves in a tomb. "We shall see. The needles inside her are clever. They feed on fear, on weakness, on doubt. You cannot stop them, not even with your spells." Lyra's hands glowed faintly, the power inside her pulsing in response to the danger. She looked at Ira and the king, then back at the sorcerer, her voice small but firm. I will not let you control me." The sorcerer's smile faltered slightly. He had underestimated the bond forming between Princess, Nanny, and King. That bond, the trust, the courage, the love, was a force even his dark magic could not easily touch. Ira whispered quickly, "Focus, Lyra. The needles respond to fear. You have none when you are brave. Let your light guide you." The princess closed her eyes, centering herself. She felt the warmth of her own power, the rhythm of her heartbeat, and the courage that had grown in her through weeks of suffering and trust. The needles pulsed violently one last time, as though resisting her will, and then they faltered. Lyra's hands glowed brighter, a steady light that extended outward. The needles shimmered, then began to dissolve, their cruel magic breaking under the force of her courage. The sorcerer's face twisted in surprise and anger as the curse unraveled before his eyes. "No," he shouted, raising his hands to strike, but the combined power of Lyra's awakening light, Ira's protective wards, and the Alpha King's commanding presence formed a barrier around the princess. The dark magic recoiled, twisting and snapping like brittle branches. Lyra opened her eyes, now glowing with full confidence, and extended her hands. A wave of energy pulsed outward, dissolving the last remnants of the poison needles, leaving her body free and pure. She trembled slightly, exhausted but triumphant. The sorcerer, realizing his plan had failed, attempted to retreat, but the Alpha King's voice cut through the hall like steel. "You will not leave. You have defied the princess and me. You will answer for this." The sorcerer hesitated, then vanished into a shadowed corner, leaving behind only the echo of his dark laughter. The castle seemed to exhale, releasing the tension that had gripped it for weeks. Ira knelt beside Lyra, checking her pulse and breathing. "It is done," she whispered softly. "The needles are gone, the poison is no more." Lyra looked at her, eyes wide with a mixture of awe and relief. I am free." "Yes," Ira said gently, brushing a damp strand of hair from the princess's face. "You are free, stronger than ever." The Alpha King stepped forward, his face softened by relief and pride. "You have faced this with courage," he said quietly. I have underestimated you, my daughter, but you have shown me strength beyond my understanding." Lyra's small hand reached for her father's. For the first time in weeks there was no fear, no trembling, only trust and love. "Thank you, father," she said softly. The king smiled faintly, the lines of worry easing from his face. "And thank you, Ira," he added. "You have not only saved my daughter but reminded me of the strength that comes from care and courage." Outside the ruined tower, the first rays of sunlight broke fully over the horizon, casting the castle in golden light. The storm had passed, leaving the world renewed, and within its walls the darkness that had haunted the princess was gone, at least for now. Lyra rose slowly, her glowing hands still pulsing softly with power. She turned to Ira, her eyes shining. I couldn't have done it without you," Ira smiled faintly. "You did all the hard work. I only guided you. Courage was always inside you, Lyra. You just had to trust it." The Alpha King placed a hand on Lyra's shoulder, his gaze steady and full of quiet pride. "And I will always trust you," he said, "as my daughter and as the future of this kingdom." For the first time, Lyra felt the full weight of her heritage, not as a burden but as a gift. The courage that had grown inside her through fear and suffering now burned brightly, a light that could guide her through any darkness. But even in victory, the castle whispered secrets. Shadows lingered where the sorcerer had vanished, and somewhere deep within the hidden corridors, other threats stirred. Ancient magic, older than the castle itself, had been awakened by Lyra's power. It was dormant now, waiting, watching. And while the needles were gone, the princess's journey was far from over. Ira helped Lyra to the balcony overlooking the castle grounds. The wind was fresh and cold, carrying the scent of rain and stone. Lyra's glowing hands rested lightly on the balcony railing as she looked out over the world she had nearly lost and then reclaimed. "I can feel it," Lyra whispered. "Something awake inside me, but it's different now. I am stronger. I am not afraid." Ira nodded. You have faced the darkness and survived. That courage will guide you, and I will be with you always." The Alpha King joined them, his gaze on his daughter steady, protective, and full of pride. "The world will not understand what you are capable of," he said softly. "But I will, and that is enough for now." Lyra smiled faintly, the glow of her power reflecting in her blue-gray eyes. "Thank you, both of you, for staying when no one else could." Ira squeezed her hand gently. "We will face the future together, Princess, whatever it brings." The sun rose higher, illuminating the castle in warmth and light. The storm had passed. The needles were gone. The poison was broken. Lyra had survived, grown, and transformed. But beyond the walls of the fortress, the whispers of ancient magic promised that this was only the beginning of her story. A tale of courage, trust, and the power that lies within even the most fragile heart. And in the shadows, silent and watchful, other forces began to stir, waiting for the moment to test the bonds of Princess, Nanny, and King once more. But for now, the Alpha King's daughter stood tall, free from fear, her power luminous and her courage absolute. The castle had weathered the storm, and within its walls, hope, trust, and love had won the first battle against darkness.